Hello, in today's video, we're going to look at the pathway blood takes to get to different parts of the body. In a previous video, we looked at the pathway blood takes from superior vena cava or inferior vena cava to aorta. In this video, we're going to look at the pathway blood takes from the ascending aorta to other parts of the body. Our primary focus will be upper extremities and lower extremities, but we will also focus on the GI tract. Let's look at our first example. First example is blood from aorta, ascending aorta, to muscles around the right radial bone. Okay, so let's start. Blood reaches the ascending aorta. From ascending aorta, it goes into the aortic arc. From aortic arc, since it has to go towards the right side, from our last video, we know that it has to take the brachiocephalic trunk. Now, brachiocephalic trunk further on splits into two different arteries. One artery is basically going towards or to the brain, and that is the right common carotid, which splits into right internal carotid and right external carotid. But then brachiocephalic trunk also splits into right subclavian artery. Now, right subclavian artery further on splits into two other arteries. One goes again towards the brain, and that is the right vertebral artery. And the other one that goes towards the armpit area is right axillary artery. Once the right axillary artery goes towards the brachium area, right brachium area, it becomes right brachial artery. Now, right brachial artery splits into two arteries. That would be right radial artery and then right ulnar artery. Those are our last two divisions. Now, again, the question says that the blood should be provided to the muscles around the right radial bone. Since it is a right radial bone, the artery that provides blood to those muscles would be right radial artery. Again, from ascending aorta, it goes to aortic arc. Aortic arc goes through brachiocephalic trunk. Then it splits into right common carotid, right subclavian artery. We have to take the right subclavian artery route. Right subclavian splits into right vertebral artery and then right axillary artery around the armpit. We have to take right axillary artery pathway. Then right axillary, once it enters brachium, becomes right brachial artery. And then, as we said earlier, since it's right radial bone, muscles around the right radial bone, we are taking the right radial artery pathway. Blood from ascending aorta to muscles around the fibula. So the first example was of right upper extremity. This example is for lower extremities. Now it could be right or left. It doesn't matter because it's the same. Okay, so let's start. So from the ascending aorta, blood goes through the aortic arc. Now remember that we have to, since we are going inferior towards the lower extremities, we are not providing, or the blood is not going through the brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid, or the left subclavian. It's actually going through the descending aorta. Once the descending aorta, thoracic aorta, passes the diaphragm, goes through the aortic hiatus, it becomes abdominal aorta. From abdominal aorta, it splits into right, and left common iliac artery. Let's say we're taking the right side, because let's just say it's right fibula. So in that case, we're taking the right common iliac artery. From right common iliac artery, it splits into right internal iliac artery or right external iliac artery. We have to take the right external iliac artery pathway. Once blood flows through the right external iliac artery, once it enters the femoral region or the femoral triangle, it becomes femoral artery. A femoral artery switches side, so it goes from anterior to posterior, and once it enters the popliteal fossa, it becomes popliteal artery. Now, popliteal artery splits into two arteries. The first is anterior tibial artery, and then the other one is posterior tibial artery. Since blood is provided to the right fibula, we have to focus on the posterior tibial artery here. Now, posterior tibial artery goes posterior inferior, or it also splits into one other artery, and that is right fibular or peroneal artery. As we said earlier, that our muscle should be around the fibula. One example is fibularis brevis. So since that is around the fibula, the artery that the blood takes to provide that muscle blood is right fibular artery. Okay, so recap. From ascending aorta, blood goes through the aortic arc. From aortic arc, it goes through the descending aorta or the thoracic aorta. Once it passes the diaphragm, it becomes abdominal aorta. Now, abdominal aorta splits into right and left common iliac artery. So since you're focusing on right fibula, let's just focus on the right common iliac artery. Right common iliac artery splits into right internal iliac artery and right external iliac artery. Blood passes through the right external iliac artery into the femoral region, and the artery becomes femoral artery. The femoral artery then pierces through the muscles, goes posterior, and becomes popliteal artery once it enters the popliteal fossa. Then popliteal artery goes inferior, splits into anterior tibial artery, which actually goes anterior, and splits into posterior tibial artery, which goes downward, inferior. Posterior tibial artery then splits into posterior tibial artery, but then it also splits into right fibular artery. And again, focuses on right fibula. So in that case, right fibular artery is our last artery that blood takes in order to reach to the muscle, which is fibularis brevis. So that's our lower extremities example. Now our last example is blood from ascending aorta to brachialis muscle. And this should be left brachialis muscle. Blood, first of all, enters the ascending aorta. From ascending aorta, blood goes through the third division of the aortic arc. So let's just say it goes to aortic arc first. From aortic arc, it takes the third division, goes through the left subclavian artery. Now, there is no left brachiocephalic trunk or anything. It's only brachiocephalic trunk. There's only one. There is a special artery that takes blood towards the left side, and that is left subclavian artery. Left subclavian artery then splits into left vertebral artery, and then splits into left axillary artery once it goes around the armpit area. Then the same axillary artery goes around the brachium and it becomes left brachial artery. Since the muscle of interest is brachialis muscle, it is present in the brachium area, and the last artery that blood takes to reach the muscle would be left brachial artery. Just to recap, blood flows into the ascending aorta first, then from ascending aorta it goes to the aortic arc. From aortic arc it takes a third division, goes through the left subclavian artery, then from left subclavian artery splits into left vertebral artery, which goes to the brain, and then splits into the left axillary artery, which goes around the armpit area. We take the left axillary artery, then the left axillary artery, once it enters the brachium region, becomes left brachial artery, and since our interest, the muscle of interest is left brachialis muscle, we stop at left brachial artery. Thank you for watching the video, and feel free to check out my other videos around anatomy of heart and also the pathway blood takes from superior inferior vena cava to aorta. Thank you very much.